Okay, I now come to point 16, which is secondary characters. What I find cool in the saga is that all the secondary characters have depth. I mean, and not even just like a little bit of depth, I mean like serious depth. They all have their own personalities, thoughts, interpretations of events, motivations, paths, futures, where they're going to. Just you really get the feeling that when a character is introduced, they haven't been created in the here and now and exist only for that purpose. You get the real impression that there's somebody who's been around and that they're going to continue to exist should they leave and not die. So just some examples of this. Obviously the character of Debbie Hemlock, who is introduced in the third book, as I said. She has certain personality traits that show she's already had a life, she's already had a boyfriend, probably, from the way she deals with her relationship with Darren. What is interesting is seeing when she showed up again, and it's been this massive gap of years, and Darren's been up and had all these experiences, and she's lived a normal human life, and he's so interested in that, and seeing her go to university, and she's learned to bake scones and all sorts of ridiculous things, but just that she has a life. Alice Burgess is an interesting character who gets very little time, really, as she shows up quite late into the saga. In the 8th book, as I said, you know, there's a lot of death going on in the city, and she is the chief police officer. Quite an elderly lady, I think in her 50s. I'm not entirely sure if it lists it, I haven't checked. And she, when she discovers about the vampires and the vampires and the war going on, she wants to help out. And she's just tough and fierce, and you see her whole, her policing background shine through in her character. And, Harkat. Harkat's an interesting character, because Harkat is a reanimation of a character who is killed, except he exists before that character dies, because Mr. Tiny can manipulate time. Mr. Tiny is kind of just this guy who's manipulating stuff the whole way along. It's not really important, except toward the whole finale, but But the character of Harkat I find interesting because he develops his own unique personality beyond that of the person he was before. And yet retains certain aspects, like the character he was before, Kurd, who I mentioned, the character who Maps, is going to become a vampire prince and betray the clan because he feels it's the only way to avert a war. And that if the vampires would have to surrender the freedom and become like the vampires and kill people when they drink and stuff, it has to be better than the clan being wiped out, at least in Kurda's eyes. And he wants to seek peace, at least, between the clans through negotiation. And Harkat, although he's really badass with an axe, and like cleaves people up and stuff a lot of the time when the fighting is necessary, he always pushes that when the war is over, when the Vampirese lord is dead, there should be peace. And it's established in the final book that that is what Harkat does. Or at least attempts to do after Darren is out of the picture. In Twilight, in comparison, I just feel, I mean, you get your main lot. Obviously, Bella has got, you know, some depth, some background, some personality. It isn't explored particularly, it's not to my knowledge. I didn't see a lot of it. I mean, she's got an established character as being smart, reasonably well read, if not an avid reader, and, you know, was quite popular, and part albino. I remember that detail. Don't know why, I just do. You know, she doesn't have to pass the Cullens, specifically Edward. They get some quite cool, actually, details. I can't remember. One of them fought in the Civil War or something, one of the older Cullens. I just think little things like that show glimmers of the potential that the book did have, and it could have been something much cooler than it was, and is, which is a sappy love story. But I suppose this brings me sort of around to my next point, which is point 17, secondary monsters. Obviously, both books have vampires. What I find really cool about the saga is that it has more than just vampires. I mean, I know you're going to argue the point Twilight has stuff, I'll get to that in a sec. Okay, in the saga, you have two clans of what are effectively vampires. The vampires, as we know them, that Darren is, who drink small amounts of blood, and then you've got a completely separate clan who split away 400 years ago. This is established in the book, it's explained how it happened, who call themselves vampires. And they always kill a person when they drink, because they drain all their blood to absorb that person's soul, their spirit, and keep them alive, because they see that as being very honourable. Because they drink so much blood, this affects their physical appearance. Their skin turns purple, their eyes, nails, and lips turn red. Because they drink so much blood, they don't need to drink as much, so they only drink about once a month. When they do, they treat the ritual, the hunting in a very ritualistic manner. They mark the person they plan to kill and feed upon from before they actually indulge in the act, and they will not enter that person's home, which is where the supposed myth of how a vampire can't enter a person's home without being invited spawned from in the Darren Shan universe. That happens with a couple of the ones that don't actually count. It's explained how they came about, which is quite cool. Like, for example, it's established that although vampires have shadows and can be seen in mirrors, the video cameras and normal cameras won't get a picture because their atoms react strangely, which is sort of the same kind of science bullshit that I was calling Stephenie Meyer on in trying to create the Venom diamond structured sparkly things that she's created. But I just feel that going to the trouble of actually explaining why it, you know, is a little better than just stating that it happens. As well as vampires and vampires, there are a whole host of different beings. For example, there are the little people, who play a reasonably important role, the most important of which is Harkat molds. Little people are reanimated beings. They're sort of short, but quite bulky. Often described as being wider than they are tall. They wear blue robes, which is mostly just ceremonial, and masks, because they need it to filter the air, otherwise it's poisonous. Their eyes are massive and green and lamp-like, and their teeth are razor sharp. They have no sense of smell or taste, so they will eat any kind of meat, even if it's rotten, and, you know, a sort of dead skunk that's been on the side of the road for weeks, kind of, and they just eat it and dig in and don't care. They're disgusting and yet fascinating, and a really quite cool invention. Also, they can't speak, except Harkat, who can, because he needs to be able to deliver a message. But they're telepathic to balance that out. And then you get the freaks at the freak show, who are effectively just either mutated or particularly skillful humans, in a way. There's Everyone, who becomes one of Darren's best friends while he is at the Cirque for the first sort of 3 books. And he is a snake boy. He's got green scales, and his hair is yellow, and his eyes, and he's got webbed hands and toes, and he can control a pet snake that he has just because he's particularly good at taking care of it, I suppose. It's not he can communicate with it or anything. Although Darren can communicate with Madame Octo by playing a flute. That isn't really ever explained. Oh no, wait, it is, but it's not important.